Hi everyone, this is Joseph here, and I'm going to show you a deck profile for UFS. If you haven't yet heard of UFS, then it stands for Universal Fighting System. It's been around for a few years, it's had its ups and downs, but I used to be pretty good at this game, and I'm trying to sort of get back into it again with some friends. And the deck I've been playing is Donovan, who's a character I actually had some success with back in 2009, when I actually won Nationals using this character. It's a different version of that character, but still very, very good, I find. And yeah, so if you don't know UFS, then make a comment in the post and I'll see if I can figure out how to make a video to teach you how to play. But yeah, without further ado, we'll just get straight into it, shall we? Now, I'm going to presume that people know what the cards are that come to UFS. If you don't, then I would heavily recommend UFSultra.com. There's some really good stuff on there that shows a full-on database that can teach you pretty much every card in the game. So I'll start with the character, obviously, which would be Donovan. His abilities are to boost his damage depending on how many cards he's played already, and also to shut off foundations or assets. Your opponent gets to do one of yours as well, but you'll find that there are a lot of counters to this deck that ability can get rid of. Or the cards that I play, you find there's a lot of people playing counters to them that you can get around. Now, first things first will be the attack lineup. I believe I'm running 14 attacks, but 16 3-check or less. And our first 3-check would be when the moon comes over the mountain. Now, anyone who's played UFS in the past couple of years knows what this card is. It's nuts. It's just disgusting. There's just so many things you can do with it. But enough on that one, because everyone knows this one. A single Super Mega Buster, which is used just for the stun, really. I mean, Donovan can make it so that it's slightly bigger, and if you play it on the end of a string, you can find that it can actually be a kill condition with Donovan if you've used cards already. Mega Ball times 3. I absolutely adore Mega Ball. It's absolutely fantastic, and it plays into the strategy of this deck so well. It's a weapon itself, which means it gets buffed from Donovan, and it also buffs the next attack for the difficulty, which will then get a buff from Donovan. 2 copies of Power Wave. This is primarily used for the +0 block, which is highly useful. You often find that you also get a decent damage buff off of it, and it does combo quite well from one of the other attacks in this deck. It's quite simple, that one. 2 copies of Blizzard Sword, which is Donovan's signature attack. I was originally running 4 copies of Blizzard Sword, but I often found that the 5 difficulty on the card made it so you couldn't attach it on the end of strings. It's quite a good opener, but if you really needed it, you can always win the moon for it or search for it in other ways. And you can't use Donovan's damage buff on the multiple, as much as multiple is a busted keyword. 3 copies of Trinity Geyser. Now, in testing, this has been the MVP of this deck. It's such a good card. I mean, people have said that they thought that it wasn't so hot, but I think it's amazing. I think it's possibly the best attack in the game. You just win if you resolve one. If you've got 2 or you resolve a second, you will win the game, unless they get revoked. But one of the nice things about the way I've built this deck is if it does get revoked, you're not at your wit's end. You can continue your turn. And a little sort of surprise move that I've used would be Leona Blade. I was originally running 3 copies of this as well as 3 copies of Trinity Geyser, which means 6 2-checks in the deck. And that's quite heavy for a deck. But comboing Leona Blade from a Trinity Geyser is foul. You can, go straight through into the stun 3. You can also go from it into it from either Blizzard Sword, including its multiple, which means you get the 5 damage from, or the 6 damage, let's say it's the opening attack, 6 damage from Blizzard Sword plus Donovan, another 5 from the multiple, and then you'll get a +2 buff from Donovan on Leona Blade, because it's weapon and combos from a ranged, and because of Blizzard Sword's effect to drop its multiple copy, the combo just slides into place quite beautifully. So I found this really, really quite helpful. And it combos off of Trinity Geyser like a treat. Asset-wise, I'm actually only running 2, and it's 2 copies of Surprise Here's a Napkin. Yet another champion card, because anyone who plays UFS knows that champion cards are quite important these days. It's ranged, which means it buffs from Donovan's cards, because Donovan can buff from any card in your card pool with a printed ranged or weapon keyword, not attack. And you can use Surprise Here's a Napkin to also combo into Leona Blade, which means you can get a stun 3 big fatty just from having Surprise Here's a Napkin, and you'll get +2 off the damage just by having it there. And then you can always just add it to your hand, play an attack the next turn after it's gone to your staging area, then play it again and buff the control trick for the next card. So this I've found is extremely useful. Now onto the foundation base, there's some, I mean this deck is built of good, so there's some fairly solid staples in there. There's 3 copies of Kapuken Training, which is used to counter throws, and many other keyworded cards. Cards just a staple really. 3 copies of High School Crush. I've been told off by a few people for not running 4 of this card, but I think the luck factor on it is enough to put me off of playing the card at the full set. It is still, however, extremely good. 3 one-man wolf pack. I've considered taking this card out, as good as it is, because it doesn't actually do much in your staging area. However, it is a target to combo into Trinity Geyser without having to worry about progressive difficulty if something stops it. So that's decent, and a 0-5 is never bad. 2 copies of Living with Determination and 2 copies of wherever it's gone. Relinquishing the Championship. These 2 go together like bread and butter. You know, you attack with, say, Mega Ball, add this to your momentum, then if you don't have a When the Moon, search for the Geyser, or search for whichever is necessary, and you can always use the Living with Determination for momentum for your multiple for Blizzard Sword. So putting those down. We then have 1 copy of Agile Warrior. You would be surprised how often this saves people. It's such a strong card, but it's very underrated, I find. Quite simply, just you worry about block zones. So the block zones in this deck are actually quite consistent. You often find that you may have the wrong one. This solves that problem instantly. 4 copies of Champion of Southtown. Champion of Southtown and Trinity Geyser are, again, just like bread and butter, or just, your sugar in my tea. And then it's just useful. You can also get a nice damage buff out of it if you have multiple copies, because you shouldn't need to use more than 1 copy for its form, but it can be handy. But the reason you run this, and the reason you run Trinity Geyser, is this card. Suspended Sword. Suspended Sword, I thought, was terrible when I first looked at it. I thought it was crap. However, it's probably the best foundation in this deck. The only reason I'm not running 4 of it is its lack of a block. And the fact that I have 4 Hero Southtown, Champion of Southtown in the deck. Because Champion of Southtown can just quite simply fish it out of your graveyard. You don't even need it in your staging area. Why -1 foundation when you could just pull it out of your grave? And you can damage buff off of this. It combos by using it or Champion of Southtown. You can go into Trinity Geyser and off of a Mega Ball into those 2. You'll be checking a 5 on Trinity Geyser, 3 if you used Surprise Here's a Napkin, which is foul, quite frankly. Then the more sort of simple cards in the deck, we're running 2 copies of Tribal Protector, because there are bad checks in this deck and quite a few high difficulty cards. 2 is enough because of the lack of block. It also, however, combos very, very well with my 4 copies of Tainted Blood. Tainted Blood is primarily used on the foundation or foundation that has been targeted by your opponent using Donovan's ability. However, if you target Tribal Protector with Tainted Blood, it does nothing to it because you never play any of the abilities on it, they just happen because of static text, which is really, really good. And having +3 speed on a Geyser, or more specifically Leona Blade, can be deadly. For the same reason, I'm running 2 copies of Glacial Assault. Glacial Assault has a nice little inbuilt defense. If your opponent does play abilities that blow stuff up, then you get a free card. But it's more used just as the high block, and you get having a 5-speed Geyser or a 4-speed Leona Blade can make the difference between whether it hits or not. So we like this one. Then another sort of good staple, Human Weapon, just very good, really. 3+ damage, can't complain. If they block your Mega Balls, then it means they're not blocking your Geysers or your Blades. 3 Fearless, because off of the good response you get Blade and Geyser, which is handy. But it's, again, primarily used for the good stats and the draw. A single copy of So Sweet Ridiculous. There is a second copy of this going to go into my sideboard. I haven't built a sideboard for this properly yet, primarily because there's no way I'd be going to a tournament really between now and the next set coming out, and by the time that comes out, the deck will probably change completely. Although I would side in a second one of these, just because the thing I found with this deck is that it has a slight issue with throw decks, as do most decks, to be fair. Less so than some, but, you know, if a Clarkbuster comes at you, you want to do something about it. This doesn't particularly help with that particular attack, but it's good at any super buffed throw. And then Super Fighting Robot, again, awesome stats, and a nice little effect on the ability, high block primarily, and then to finish off we have 2 Naivety just for the low block. It's a blank foundation, but you can't complain at those stats. The sideboard, if I were to make one, would probably consist of anti-throw tech, so Sibling Rivalry, which admittedly only has a low block, but it does deal very well with Clarkbuster, and in combination with Agile Warrior, which a second copy would go into the sideboard, can mitigate throws quite nicely. I'd also side in the 4th copy of Kokuken Training, and I'd probably put a Law of the Land in sideboard as well in case of characters that buff speed quite heavily, such as Leona or Sasquatch. I'm really enjoying the deck. I think it's really good. People have often asked me why I don't play my own character card for UFS, and the answer is because I never designed it to be played by myself. I wanted other people to play with me, no pun intended. But Donovan will always have a soft spot in my heart for being the guy that got me to where I was with UFS, and hopefully one day, fingers crossed, he'll get me there again. So I've also still got plenty of copies of my own character card, so there's plenty there up for grabs if anybody still wants one. I rotate, however, during the middle of the year, so if you want one, you might want to do it fairly quickly, or if you just want one for collection purposes, that's fine too. And yeah, I mean, I'll probably do a deck profile on myself, even if I don't play it, and see what people think. So thank you for watching. Do like, subscribe and share as you would anybody else, and I'll see you all later.